Welcome back. New topic I want to talk about with Andy and Jake. I want to talk about steroids. Now, Andy has a background in sports, great athlete, played football at Rutgers University, number 67. One of my favorite numbers because that was the year of the great Red Sox impossible dream, 1967. But steroids is a very intense topic. And the first thing that comes to my mind, Andy, is perfect example how steroids can destroy a person is Lyle Alzado. Here was a guy that was a great, intense football player, a mountain of a man. And yet, when he died, he was a skeleton of himself. Steroids absolutely destroyed his whole body, and he died a very young man in his 40s. That really drew a lot of interest, but to me, it's still out there. People are still doing it, and I think about, not that I'm the biggest pro wrestling fan, but there's been so many pro wrestlers in the last 20, 25 years that have died from steroid abuse. So Andy, address the fact how big steroids is a problem in our society.
It's a very big problem. I think that most of what we're exposed to are those kinds of stories that you just spoke about, Howie. Lyle Alzado, a great football player with, I believe it was the Oakland Raiders. Yes?
In Denver.
In Denver. And, many others that, that have used steroids, human growth hormone. There's, a variety of different cocktails, so to speak, that athletes have been using for improving their performance, building their bodies, and I think that when young people are exposed to this and then see that as an option for either a ticket for them to get a football scholarship or what they think is a pathway to professional sports, in many cases, I think they probably don't really have a full understanding of what the consequences are. There's a lot of attention to, in the mental health field, there's a lot of attention to eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia. These are things that people have heard about. But, a related issue is the use of these drugs, steroids, and so forth. And I think that what many athletes have exhibited, in addition to the negative impact on their physiology, is also an impact on their, their emotional state, the level of aggression that young athletes have exhibited when they've used these kinds of drugs, and the kind of serious, violent issues that it has gotten them into off the field is something that's probably not as well known. Howie mentioned that I was an athlete in my day, and I can remember as a freshman in college when I played at Rutgers, there were, a couple of older guys that I spoke to, that I looked up to, and I discovered in my conversations with them that they were using some stuff, and there wasn't much of a taboo at that time. It was sort of under the radar, and for a period of time I was really contemplating that myself. I thought that if I could get something that would give me an edge and that would bring my game up a bit more, that maybe it's something I should consider. So I did some research, I spoke to a few people about it, and fortunately, when I considered what some of the consequences, long-term consequences were, that I decided this is not something that I wanted to do. But, it's a real concern.
Yeah, I remember one night I was turning on WWE Raw, and they were doing a tribute to a wrestler named Eddie Guerrero. He was 37 years old. He died in his hotel room. Abused steroids his whole career. and many other wrestlers died from steroid abuse, and many in the 20s and 30s from constantly using steroids. So, I think those are wake-up calls.
Yeah, and I think it's very seductive because, if you're accustomed to building your body by working out in a gym, doing other kinds of running and calisthenics and isometrics and isotonics and all these different ways of building up your body, and then all of a sudden there's something where if you just give yourself a little injection, the results that you'll see in a short period of time in terms of the muscle mass is very seductive, because if you work out in a gym, there's mirrors all over the place. There's other people working out there. If you're just starting out and you see some of these other guys, you think, oh man, what is it going to take me to get to that point? And if you find out that you can take a shortcut to do that, once you get into that, it's a hard thing to reverse, because the reinforcement of looking at your body and seeing that kind of accelerated growth and that kind of muscle mass and that image of yourself that you thought that I'd like to look like one of those guys, makes it very difficult to get off of. So,
absolutely, and I think it goes, and you can look at the Hall of Fame voting every year. To me, Barry Bonds, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGuire are never getting in because people consider them cheaters. And you look at Sammy Sosa, his rookie year with the Texas Rangers, small guy, small shoulders, and then you look at him with the Chicago Cubs, his arms were 4 times the amount, humongous, had acne all over his face, which I think is steroids. And you look at Barry Bonds, when he was in his early 30s, mid 30s, he averaged about 35, 40 home runs. And all of a sudden, he's almost 40 years old. He's cranking out 70 home runs a year. It was unbelievable. That's why I think, that was such an example of the steroid abuse that took place during those years.
yeah, and then, I guess what happens really when you read stories about this is that they see other guys doing it. They see the kind of salaries they're getting, the fame, and they feel as though they're on unequal ground. And so they want to compete at the same level as these other guys. And so this is a way to do it. And, if you go back, though, a generation ago, while you might not have heard as much about steroids, you heard a lot about amphetamines. So there was always something that ball players...
Greenies, they used to call them in the
Yeah.
50s and 60s, I read about, yeah.
that ball players might be using in order to get that edge. And, what's really sad, though, is I think, and again, I don't have the specific stories right here, but I think when the steroid has an impact upon your state of mind, and it increases your level of aggression, because it's not just about building your body, it's something that also does that. You mentioned Christian Peter before. If I'm not mistaken, I think that was also an issue that he might have been dealing with. So I think then you're really, you're putting the people that are close to you, your loved ones, at tremendous risk. And so it's more than just building your body. It's, turning you into a weapon of destruction, not only on the playing field, but also out there in your family and in the community. So it's a very insidious, serious issue, and more younger people are being exposed to it. And there really needs to be very strict guidelines, particularly in high schools and in colleges, against the use of these kind of drugs.
Yeah. I think steroids, may be a, real bad example of what to do. And many times, my message, for kids out there is oftentimes you learn what to do by seeing examples of what not to do. You look at Alex Rodriguez or a guy like Barry Bonds. Here are two athletes who had all the talent in the world. They had everything, but there was a part of Alex and there was a part of Barry that just never felt like they were good enough. And I think the message between an Alex or a Barry is that you should be content with the gifts that you were given, the gifts that you are blessed with, and you should roll with that. And if you try to cut corners, and if you're trying to cheat, you're only cheating yourselves, because here are two guys who had been sure Hall of Famers. Now, it's like you talk about Barry Bonds. He could barely hold the job as a Marlins hitting coach. And, A-Rod, what's happened to him? So I think, a lot of, cultural messages really, if you look at what not to do, you can look at, you look at guys who have made mistakes, you can learn on what to do. But I think it's very important, for psychologists or sports psychologists to get involved in the athletes' lives. And I think many times, insecure athletes will go to steroids because they really don't trust in their own abilities. So it's about understanding the joy of being an athlete and to really get, minimize all this competitiveness and just, roll with the gifts that you were given and maximize whatever you have in your toolbox.
Absolutely.